Hello and welcome to Gorilla and the Geek, the podcast for sweaty nerds by sweaty nerds. My name is Kyle from Geeks Weekly, and I'm joined, as always, by my good pal, John the Ginger Gorilla. Johnny, what's going on?
Not much, dude. Recording on a Saturday. It's a beautiful, gloomy day outside. If that
Okay.
makes sense. I mean, it's not. It didn't rain, but it looks like it's threatening to rain all day. I don't know. Kind of.
Hefty clouds.
It's
It's
hefty clouds, dude.
and something else that's hefty is our schedule today.
Yeah,
It's
man.
fight day. John is a massive UFC fan, and I know he's looking forward to watching some lightweights punch each other repeatedly in the face.
Yeah. Oh my god, I almost said Tony. Justin Gaethje versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I'm very excited for that. But that's not what we're here to talk about, Kyle. We're here to talk about a thrilling show, Haunting of Bly Manor.
Yes, The Haunting of Bly Manor, a show about scares, about love, about the haunting of Bly Manor, about finding oneself, and thematically, it fits really well with this week because the week this is releasing is the week of Halloween. Happy spooky season.
Also, it's very appropriate that it is gloomy out, right?
That's true.
Because where they were located, it was always gloomy out. I mean,
yeah. Oddly enough,
in England, it's just like always like, hey, it's probably gonna rain.
Oddly enough, the one episode that I remember there being a lot of sunlight is one of the more depressing ones, in my opinion, at least. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So, little peek behind the curtains. John had been telling me for about a year now, I think, to watch The Haunting of Hill House, which is a Netflix series that preceded this one. And for a while, I don't know. I think I don't normally think to myself, I would like to be scared today. But in watching this show, I remember just how much like a scary movie, how much fun a scary movie can be. And then you put that into 9-hour long episodes, and it's like, oh, I remember why I used to like going to scary movies back when movies were a thing. So, John, you watched the first season. I still haven't watched it yet. Technically, this is a different show, I guess, but it's still under the same umbrella.
I actually
what were your
just
thoughts?
thought of that too. So first of all, Haunting a Hill House, as Kyle said, I raved about it. I was like, everyone who likes scary things need to watch it because I was genuinely terrified through some of the episodes watching it. Maybe it was because I'd also watch them at like 9-10 o'clock at night in just a dark room, and it was scary. It's a scary show, especially Hill House is it just the things that it brings up, and then being in a dark room, it's like, oh crap, like it's just it's not a good feeling to go to bed to. And with that said, I was like, and the storyline behind it was done really well. And with scary shows, I think that's what it needs now. And that's what I saw because I'm a big fan of American Horror Story too. There's some seasons where it has really good stories, some seasons it doesn't. But one thing that I like out of scary content, whether it's shows or movies, is I don't care about that teenage jump scare type movie. The reason I say teenage is because that's who I feel it's marketed towards. Those cheap scares, those things where there's no story backing it. It's just like, why am I watching this? Like, I don't want to just be like, huh, and then move on with my day and get nothing out of it. And The Haunting of Hill House and what we'll get into, The Haunting of Bly Manor, they have good background stories and themes throughout the season that you could tell someone put love and effort into it, crafting this show. With that said, I also do think it's weird that The Haunting of Hill House is one show on Netflix and The Haunting of Bly Manor is another. Because I thought they did pretty well marketing it, like saying, hey, season 2 is not going to be season 1, right? Not the same story, not the same storyline. So it's a strange thing that they didn't put it under the same like the Haunting of series, right? And then season 1, Hill House. Season 2, Bly Manor. Maybe in the future they don't want them to always be the Haunting of, so maybe that's why they'll probably try to shy away from it. Hopefully there is a future. I don't know if it was renewed for a 3rd season or not. But hopefully it is. But yeah,
So,
I thought it was great, and I think it lived up, and I think it's doing well enough that Kyle's gonna go back and watch the 1st season.
yeah. So real quick, The Haunting is a 1999 horror film,
Mm-hmm.
and starring Liam Neeson actually. So I'm wondering if maybe Netflix didn't want to just market it as The Haunting, the series.
Yeah.
Maybe they just wanted to make sure it was branded properly, but I don't know. That is an interesting point. As for me, with watching the 1st season now, I will definitely be doing so, especially this week of Halloween. Yeah, what you said was really on point. I think this is an example of this is something that I heard Chris Stuckman say a long time ago, and it really is something that I firmly believe in, and something that we discussed this week. I don't like when people classify a scary movie as, well, I didn't jump out of my seat a lot.
Yeah, I don't think
That's
ever needed.
that's not what a, because I can be scared of something and not jump.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a jump scare. It's a ploy. It's a cliche that a lot of horror films have been using forever. But I think the truly great horror movies make you scared throughout the movie, and a lot of people classify that as being creeped out, or it
Yeah.
was creepy, not scary.
Literally said this to you yesterday, and you clarified that exact point.
Yes.
I was like, I felt like it, because I mean, and this, I don't think this is spoiling anything for Kyle. I felt like season 1 there was a little more jump scares, at least in my mind, of how they set some scenes up. It's not jump scares like all of a sudden, like it's like bah right in front of your face. It's jump scare because you might notice something in the background of a shot that is more focused to the foreground. And you're like, oh crap, there's that there, or there's this there, right? And you saw some of that filming done in Bly, which I love that. I love watching a scary thing and having the foreground well lit and the background you just maybe see a person standing in a shadow, or you see something just skim across. Nothing crazy, but just that hint of like, oh, like that creepiness. I love that feeling out of horror. So, and that's why I think about these 2 shows do really well. I think Haunting a Hill House did it more, and Kyle will be able to eventually say what if he agrees or disagrees with me. Not obviously not in this pod, but I think that's one thing that was toned back a little bit in this, or it may have just been that I was expecting it, so I didn't really get the same effect, right? Because now I'm like, oh, they shoot this way, so now I kind of know. So with that, I don't know, but if y'all are listening and you agree or disagree with that, let me know, because I don't know if it's just something I've become numb to because of the idea that maybe I was looking for it, or if they just did cut back on it.
Yeah, very possible. I just think that the show does a really good job of having ambiance. Like, I think my favorite horror movie ever is The Conjuring. That movie, that was the first horror film that I saw in the theaters where I went, oh, okay, so this is what good horror is. There is lore, there are scares, there is an element of ambiance laid out throughout the entire film that you can't shake. And that happens really, really early on in Bly Manor. It's funny, they mention in episode 1. So premise of the show, we start off at a wedding. A woman arrives to the wedding rather late, seemingly, or arrives to the rehearsal dinner. Go ahead.
Spoiler alert, right? This is your
Oh
first
yeah,
time
yeah.
watching. Full spoiler for this video. We didn't really give any key points away yet, but we will. So just letting y'all know, spoiler alert, if you didn't watch, this isn't like, hey, you should watch. I mean, you should, but this is a whole video isn't a pitch about it. It's gonna go deep into it. So just letting y'all know. Spoiler alert. Continue, Kyle.
Now here's the spoiler-free pitch as to what the show is about. We start off episode 1. We start off at a wedding. A guest arrives to the rehearsal dinner, and they gather around the fireplace instead of a campfire, and they trade ghost stories. The woman who we follow at the beginning of the series comes in, and they mention, oh, the scariest ghost stories have children involved. And, she comes through and is like, well, I got a story for you. And she begins to tell the story of an au pair living in England. I don't know where exactly Bly would be in England.
I think it was just outside of London, they were saying.
There you go. And it's a story of this au pair finding a job taking care of 2 children in what we come to find out a haunted estate. And that is as spoiler free as we're getting. If you are listening on further, we're going full spoiler in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. So I think right away, when you first hear Flora repeatedly say perfectly splendid, repeatedly, you automatically know, oh, something's not right with her. Yeah. Something's wrong.
And it was one of those things. At first it was creepy, but then I wanted to start saying it. Yeah. I want to call everything perfectly splendid.
Get a Fortnite dub. Oh, that was perfectly splendid.
When you're that calm as saying something that's so perfectly splendid isn't just like, oh, this is nice, everything's cool. I love this. Perfectly splendid. And like it has a creepy tone about it. And I can't pinpoint why.
Well, it's like they were saying, it's because it's a child. When children do things that are creepy, it's much worse because it's an innocence to children. Yeah. And one of the really great things that the show does is somehow it takes the children, it portrays them as these innocent beings who actually, we come to find out, aren't like evil little monsters. Mm-hmm. But it both gives them their innocence and it strips it away very aggressively.
Yeah.
Repeatedly throughout the show. And we're going to get into the categories later, so I'm not going to talk about a specific moment that I have in mind. But we have the scene where they lock Danny in the closet, or the scenes in which we believe that they're roaming the house at night, leaving mud everywhere, but we don't know why. There's scenes where Miles puts Danny's hair behind her ear and I believe whispers slight sweet nothings in her ears. Mm-hmm. And repeatedly, I should speak for myself. I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with these kids? It can't just be that their parents died.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, they're just traumatized. It's like they know something and they have adjusted to something, and that's where your mind goes. But you also know, like, that's not it. Like, there has to be more to this story. There has to be something going on here. And then eventually you find out there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. But that's one of the cool things. It's a horror mystery, really.
Yeah. Then that's what's done so well. I love the point of the season where you're just like, what is happening? I don't know. Like, everything I thought I knew, I don't know. Except for one thing that I got early on. I picked up on. But then the show even made me second guess that idea. So like, okay. I'll say it right now. Hannah Gross. I knew she was a ghost early on. I called it, and Slee and I, we called it because the fact that she wasn't eating or drinking anything.
So here's the thing. I don't know if she was dead before Danny had arrived.
She was. So, no, she wasn't. Yeah. She died right before, as Danny showed up. So that scene where Miles pushes her into the well, which is not all, it's technically not Miles, it's Peter. But yeah. Peter Miles. Which, weird. Peter, Spider-Man, Miles, Spider-Man.
I guess that kid's gonna be the next one.
Right? British.
We do love our London-based Peter Parkers.
A lad. But that scene where he pushes, then Hannah's like, her ghost is looking at the well, that's as soon as Danny gets there. So it happened literally as Danny was arriving.
Here's the odd thing, though. Why is she able to make physical contact with people throughout the show? And why is she able to move things as a ghost?
Because she didn't, I think what they got to eventually was she never realized she was. So you know how
But so,
he was
but
talking about the
so that's the
Roadrunner.
no that I understood.
Yeah.
But the issue with that I have at least, there's a couple issues that I have with the some of the lore of the show,
Mm-hmm.
and it all centered around Hannah's character. So originally, what they say eventually, and we're skipping around, but this is all centered around this one conversation. The initial premise is if the lady in the lake kills you, she suspends you in uh, uh, purgatory
Yeah.
on the manor.
But they also mentioned that if anyone dies, or is that what you're getting at? Like,
So that was my thing. I had wished, because the narrator told us that, right?
yeah.
That she kills you and then you're suspended there.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish she just didn't say that. I wish that she just said, if you die on Bly Manor,
Yeah.
because this woman's here,
Mm-hmm.
that means you're suspended in purgatory, because that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
Cool. I also wish that when Peter died, that he wasn't, because he didn't know that he was dead at first, but when he goes to reach out for Miles' hand, his hand goes through Miles. I wish it didn't happen. I get that really gives you the sense of, okay, I understand now as an audience member this is a ghost. However, that wouldn't make sense because Hannah's able to pick up a cup. She's able to stir
Yeah.
some food. She's able to hug Owen when he's grieving about her mother. She's able to drink wine. There's moments like that where I kind of just wish that a little bit more attention was paid to those details of, like, let's make these ghosts able to make contact with people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or use the fact, keep that fact consistent of if they don't realize they're a ghost or dead yet, then they can make the contact. Because then you could still make that argument for why the Lady of the Lake could touch people. Because maybe she never really fully came to terms with that she died because she was so caught up with not dying. So then that would work. But yeah, that little non continuous like story point or that mistake there does kind of take away from it.
And that's not like a big thing that made me hate the show.
No,
That was just
obviously.
that was one of my biggest questions when I finished watching it. That, like,
And
I wish was better realized.
I think that's one of the hardest parts about writing horror.
For sure.
Is that you need these small little details to all line up, but also you need to kind of give hints towards the story. Like we needed to know that he died, which I think was kind of obvious in the moment with just him walking out. I don't think you needed,
dude. I mean,
yeah.
When someone grasps you, a ghost, mind you,
with her hand, and just with her hand goes,
and is able to carry you by your face, you're dead.
Because he died right away. Where you notice that she didn't snap Danny's neck when she did to Danny. She was just choking Danny. Which I was also like, hey, why did one get one treatment and the other one didn't? Maybe she just hit Owen harder or hit Peter harder and killed him. But yeah, I mean, those little points weren't riddled through the show, which I think also makes this one of like the better horror shows, or one of the best horror shows out there. Because they are able to keep those little mistakes to a minimum. So I although it is there, I think it's bound to be something that you find in basically any show.
A lot of things, yes, for sure.
You're never gonna have that. So it is interesting, and that's what I do like to kind of see though too. That's what I like analyzing shows. If it doesn't break the idea of the show for me, I do like picking out. Oh yeah, that they did mess up there, because it makes it's like, oh okay, cool. They still cared, but they did make a mistake. Like,
yeah, 100%. It's bound to happen. It's just something that I felt like I had to mention on the pod.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that's one thing that let's continue with the conversation about discovering throughout the season. So one of the biggest things for me that I was trying to figure out, so we talked about the Hannah mystery. for me, I didn't realize she was dead until she moved her neck really aggressively in one scene,
Hmm.
and she had like a pain. I went, "Oh my gosh, that's how she died."
Oh, I didn't even realize that. Oh, she was doing this to her neck a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, that's so I didn't even notice that.
That was a really great
that's
detail.
key. Yeah,
Really great.
that's
I
key.
assumed she wasn't eating or drinking because she knew something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it was because she was a dead person and didn't need to eat or drink. But yeah, I mean, great job on your end, yours and Punk Box's end on
Yeah, because
discovering that she was
we
dead.
just noticed that every time, especially in the beginning of the season, she would like pick some, and then she would never, and then everyone would make a comment like, "Oh, Hannah, you didn't drink your tea," or "Oh, wait," and she goes, "Oh, I'm not hungry," blah blah. I was always like, "Huh, ghosts don't eat." um, but
Yeah,
that
100%.
might have been like something coming from the first season that I may have just been like, "Oh." Especially because they mentioned when the storyteller, when she starts telling the story, she goes, "There's ghosts in many forms," and so on. So I forgot how she worded it, but she basically started saying that's not just your typical ghost, but there's ghosts in different varieties in this story. So I was like I was keen to like, who is the ghost here,
Yeah.
type of thing.
So let's talk about the mystery of what Danny was running from, because they laid
Yeah,
that groundwork right away.
yeah, I had no clue, to be honest.
When you
I
saw the lights, the two bright light eyes in the
mm-hmm.
mirror every scene, did you assume that was the ghost that was haunting the house?
No, I knew that was a ghost haunting her. Um, but I honestly thought she may have killed someone, or it was
Well,
like, and then I went, well, maybe it was her brother who died, or like maybe she was in. I jumped around from like, I knew obviously she was involved with the death somehow. That's why it's haunting her. But then I couldn't really figure out what was going on. I never really pinpointed it. So when we did get her story, I was like, "Oh, I didn't expect that."
yeah, me neither. Did you did that storyline work for you in that she was, because this show takes place in the 80s, I believe, late
Yeah,
80s.
yeah.
So she's in her 30s, which means she was in her, or she's 31, I think, in the show, or something, early
I
30s.
I don't remember.
And so that means she was like 20. She was like 20 in like the 70s. Back then, not
Well, I mean,
as.
it makes sense because even jumping ahead to when her and Jamie are together, they met and she like proposes. They mentioned that they can't get married,
Exactly, yeah. So
so it's still not.
that's the
So
thing. So for me, that story worked, of her
yeah,
being a lesbian and not
mm-hmm.
being able to
Live that
fully
life, or
realize
yeah,
herself.
mm-hmm.
But that, for me, the reason that worked so well in the show is because the one of the biggest themes of the entire season is discovering who you are,
Yeah.
even if that means discovering that you've passed on,
Mm-hmm. But
which is,
it's self realization
yeah,
in a
exactly.
sense, yeah.
And it could be negative or it could be positive, but they do phrase it as, even if it's something that's scary, it's better for you to know, because you're not living in that, in a fantasy world, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
uh for you, did the stuff with the fiance, her eventually coming out to him seemingly like a month before they got married, that leading to him angrily dying,
Mm-hmm.
did all of that, and her, maybe we'll get into her romance later, but her eventually finding someone she could be with, did all that work for you?
I thought it worked. It worked really well. I understand that they need that story for a reason of her running, like she was running away, and that's how she ended up in the job. But besides that, I don't think it needed it. Like her ghost story really didn't play into any other part of the story
No.
much besides her romance. But with that said, I don't think it hurt anything either. I think it was just like a little added caveat. It was a risk though, because if it didn't work, I think it could have been a ruining part to the season. Because you could see it as like, did it actually have to be there? And now it didn't work. So like, Yeah. But I do think it
Even
worked.
even if her and Jamie don't have chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
then that would real like the because then
Yeah.
you're so happy for this person being able to finally be themselves,
Yeah.
and finding some companionship. And if that doesn't work on screen, that's kind of like, oh well, this is really underwhelming.
Yeah. But I do think it was also nice because it throws you off of a path a little bit at the beginning. Because you think maybe the horror is gonna be centered around Danny. At least for me. Because like when she first steps out of like the cab and like it goes by and you see his reflection in the cab. That's the very first time you see it. I'm like, whoa, like she's already like there's something haunting her. So then I was like, oh, the story's gonna be focused around her and her haunting. And it's not necessarily, I mean, obviously she's one of the mains, but it's not necessarily focused around her as much as Bly Manor. And I thought that was very interesting. Do you think, would you have liked to see more done with her ghost though?
The
Or
ghost of her fiance.
yeah, or do you think it was done? Do you think it was done well?
Um, I think it was. I think it was done okay. Because really that was just to set up
The relationship.
developing her character. Really,
Yeah.
I think that the ghost served its purpose, and then we get the bigger threat immediately after finding out about her life. Because after the episode where she finally does kiss Jamie, we get the episode where we realize that Hannah's dead and that something's wrong with the kids. And so we immediately move on to, oh wait, hold on. So where's the big threat? What
Yeah.
is causing all this?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that mystery we've discussed. The next mystery, I'm gonna let you decide. Do you want to discuss the woman in the lake or perhaps the origin of the children?
Um, let's go with the children first, and then we'll go.
So this is gonna step on a contender for a category later, but I don't care. We kind of have to talk about it.
Yeah.
The fact that the uncle
Mm-hmm.
had a child with his brother's wife. That's really like that was something that I saw on the show, and I was like, "Come on, guys! One person can't have anything nice,
I kind of
really?"
liked it though.
No, it wasn't a bad thing. I was just
Yeah.
kind of like, "Oh, another sad thing."
Yeah, it just played so well into the like that's the one thing. The story that the way the story was written was perfectly splendid. Like everything it did come together really well to be like, "Oh, crap. Well, that's why that was going like this or that's why this." And like it makes sense why the uncle didn't want to be around the house at all.
Yeah,
Because he just felt so strange about these kids. It was such a weird relationship and he's trying to drink himself to forget. Um, so it makes sense why he needs the au pair and he can't take care of the kids. So it all comes together. But yeah, it's strange. And I wish they elaborated on what this accident was. Which
that's what I was gonna ask you. Do you think that the husband killed the wife and
I
himself?
I low key I low key was thinking that because of the fact that he did seem like there was something off about him. They technically grew up. They grew up in that house, so like they both had to be messed up. I mean, his brother went at later on. He was seeing himself, like he was seeing like a ghost. He mentioned when he talks to Flora, because Flora was seeing the little boy with the no face. He
Mm-hmm.
mentions growing up in the house and seeing an army man. So I wonder if they saw ghosts growing up in that house.
They
Um,
might have. I
or
mean,
if he just had an imaginary friend. I don't know, but I mean, there may have been other people in the house that like we just didn't pick, we didn't see, or spirits that we didn't like. Yeah.
yeah.
That they just didn't need to highlight. But it was a good. I think that was a solid background story to why everything is the way it is. Um, Especially because of the fact where I think it, and I'll get into this when we talk about the Lady Lake. Those two stories interweave well. in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean for because to connect the two, I mean you have the daughterless mother
Mm-hmm.
and then the motherless daughter,
Yeah.
and they're you would imagine that her finding finally a little girl
Mm-hmm.
maybe would have stopped everything. But of course, Danny makes the ultimate sacrifice, which we'll get into later. But before we get into the lady in the water, one other mystery I wanted to discuss: Did the do you feel as though the story of Peter and Becca was needed in the show?
Um, I would say yes, just because if not, the kids would have never had the problems that they had. Right? Because the only reason the kids were acting out was because it was Peter and Becca doing it with it through their bodies.
That's the only reason that they were acting weird. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, that was the thing. So
that's the
look,
biggest reason.
so yeah, so if you think about it, when Miles is away at school, um, all the things he's doing are Peter being like, "You need to do this to get back. You need to do this to get back." And the reason Peter wants to get back, it wasn't it wasn't Flora who actually wrote that note. Well, she may have, like her physical
Well,
body did, but I think Becca was having her write that note to get him to get Miles back, so then she could see Peter.
well, I don't know if Peter was with Miles,
He was. He was. I
but
think he
you
was
can't
almost.
leave the manor if you're a
Oh shit! You're
ghost.
right. So maybe he couldn't manifest.
I think what happened, I think that was all Miles
Uh huh.
because he was scared that his little sister was there with two ghosts and the lady in the lake.
That makes sense. But Peter did mention like you did the right thing with the bird at what's it called at
Well,
school.
and that's another one of the things where they didn't really
Elaborate enough. Yeah.
elaborate on what because they set the rule.
Yeah.
Peter,
You
even if
can't
he's
leave.
in someone's body, he
You
can't
can't.
leave the
That's true.
manor.
That's a good point. I forgot about that.
So what I'm wondering is, I'm wondering if Peter told him beforehand, "Hey, you have to do whatever it takes to get back here."
That's true.
And I'm wondering if the kid, because he wasn't acting like Peter when he was saying the things that he said to his teachers.
That's true.
He was acting like a kid who was scared and sad that he had to do these things, but he did them.
Yeah.
And because like when Peter's inhabiting Miles, there's a noticeable difference.
Yeah. You could tell.
But
And
still, I will say this though: I found Becca's character so incredibly frustrating. Like she was, it's tough because she's playing a woman who is in a clearly mentally, uh, would you say, verging on abusive relationship.
yeah. She's very. Yeah. I definitely abusive. I mean, we only get that one scene of aggression, but
It's at least controlling.
yeah, you could tell. Well, that's what I was gonna say. You could tell that Peter has full control over her.
Yeah.
Um,
And that was one of the more frustrating things for me as a viewer to watch, just because Peter is the truest form of evil in the show, in my
mm-hmm.
opinion. I get that he has a hard background or whatever, but him doing the things that he does causes so much damage to everyone. He literally kills Becca
Yeah,
against her will.
yeah, just so he could be with her because he doesn't want to be alone.
Yes, he's the most selfish. I mean, he's creeping around the hallways. He ki- he kills Hannah really for no reason.
Yeah,
I mean, Hannah like didn't really figure it out. Hannah didn't realize that he was Miles until weeks into her being dead. So he killed her for no reason. He's acting like a prick while he's inside Miles for no reason. He's asking for wine. I get that it's frustrating being a kid, but like, Jesus Christ, dude, shut up. Don't
also
eat
just
then.
don't be inside of him.
Yeah. He is the he's the most, he's a character who, one, he has a punchable face.
He
No
does.
offense to the actor, but in this role, he had a very punchable face. I'm sure the actor
Yeah,
could probably beat me up, but
that actor's in season 1.
That I'm aware of, yeah. And two, he's the worst. He is worse than the woman in the lake, because at least she is.
Disassociate. She's crazy.
Well, she doesn't even remember the
Yeah,
fact that she was a person.
that's true.
She just thinks to herself, I need to go to this room.
She's pure emotion.
Yeah.
And like instinct.
He's pure evil. She's pure emotion.
Yeah. And like you alluded to, I like that they gave him the backstory. I wish they gave Rebecca more of a backstory that we saw. Because like every time she went back, it was always she went back to something in the house where he had to go back. Like you got to see his mom come.
That's true.
And you saw that little storyline. So then you know that his dad abused him.
And did
probably
something
sexually.
with other kids.
Yeah, I think it was sexual abuse. And then the mom did nothing about it, so that kind of turned him into this monster. So it's interesting because then you get to see why he was made this way. But then it's still unexcusable for the actions that he chose to do.
Well, yeah, it's that classic cliche of like hurt people.
Yeah, he did so many bad things. And like you think at the beginning, oh, it's just him. He just stole money, right? But he did so much more than that. Like then he goes and kills multiple people. He's a murderer.
He tries to essentially kill and take over a child.
Yeah, kills their spirit.
Yeah. Well, tries to do it with two children because he tries to get Becca to take over Flora.
Mm-hmm.
He's on the way to killing a third person. He's on the way to killing Danny. I think he wants to put her like in the warpath of the woman.
Yeah.
Which eventually does happen, of course. But yeah, so the Peter and Becca stuff, while I thought was a little bit, while watching it, I was kind of like, well, what do I need this for? But it eventually all tied in. And now, John, let's finally discuss the woman in the lake. The reason for all the weird and awful things that happen at Bly Manor. Number one, I'd like to start off by saying I was not crazy about the episode entirely dedicated to her backstory.
I really enjoyed it.
For me, it was there's something to be said about letting too much of the toothpaste out of the tube. And with horror, that's very easy to do. Now, that's not to say I didn't like her backstory. But I just think dedicating an entire episode to her was a bit much for me.
I agree that a little mystery could go a long way also. So if they did keep it shorter, I think it would have made her creepier.
Because it does almost remove the scare from her and turns her more into like, oh, this sucks. That poor woman, she got a disease.
Yeah.
And then her sister killed her and then married her husband and like stopped her from her daughter seeing her for the first time, like all that stuff. And then you kind of feel bad for her. But go ahead with your thoughts on that.
I did enjoy that episode just because I was like, oh, it's so different from everything else. It's cool that they were able to do this and do it well.
They did do it well.
But I do 100% agree that I don't think it needed to be a whole episode necessarily. And it may have let too much of the mystery out. It does tie a lot of loose ends.
It does.
To the storyline.
You see the witch doctor at one point, and you're like, really early on in the season, and you're like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And then you realize what it is.
So it makes a lot of sense of why that land's haunted, and it gives that story and that to why everything's happening the way it's happening. But and why people have no faces or the ghosts. I think that was a nice touch of like you forget yourself. And it goes to that theme that we were talking about of finding yourself. And that would have been interesting if when Danny looked in her reflection after Lady of the Lake was in her, that she saw the Lady of the Lake's face. Because then it would have been the theme of the Lady of the Lake finally getting what she wants. So she kind of found herself. I think that would have been a cool full circle thing.
Well, so that's the question. Did the lady in the lake ever get satisfied?
I
Because
don't.
she
Yeah,
said there's a beast in the jungle and it's waiting. It's sleeping right now, but it's gonna wake up. I
that's
feel it.
true. It's a good point.
Um,
No, she probably didn't. I mean, she didn't get her daughter. Like, I think if she went in with Flora, then maybe she would have. But since she didn't get it, she didn't. Also, do you like how it was resolved?
with Danny doing the "it's you,
The
it's me, it's us."
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was a little too easy.
Um, it's tough. I mean, man, that's a really difficult question. I don't know that I liked it, but I also don't know if there's any other way to for them to have done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the other solution would have been. You can't kill her. They proved
Hmm.
that right away. She has supernatural strength. I mean, I I almost wonder. To me, the way I thought they were going to do it, I thought they were going to go into the lake and take the chest
Mm.
and bring that up above the water. But her saying "it's you, it's me, it's us." I'm also not sure why that's like the secret code.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't
I mean, the
necessarily
only
get it.
person that the first time it's ever said is Becca and Peter,
Hmm.
and that's it. So I'm not entirely sure how much that worked for me. But I mean, it was an interesting risk. I'll say that, and it did leave for even more tragedy to be struck in the final
Yeah.
episode with Danny not being able to shake it.
Hmm.
And with that said, did you like the ending of Danny's arc in this series?
Um. Yes, just for the fact that it it it, it puts an ending to who she was. I don't think she. I think her whole life was suffering, in a sense. Suffering because she couldn't say who she was in the beginning, then suffering because she felt the guilt of killing her fiance, um, and then suffering because of the Lady of the Lake. Um, so I don't think she ever was not suffering. So it makes sense that she would finally um give in, right? It almost could be like a little story of depression where
Yeah,
like you go through these fits of depression and it might change over the years of your life, and then finally it's just you can't take it anymore, and it just wears on you and wears on you and wears on you, which we saw the Lady of the Lake do to her, because she seemed like she had it under control, like life was going well.
they said it was at least 5 or 6 years, right,
Yeah, and
before.
then it started coming up again, and the happiness in her life wasn't able to override this thing that was just daunting and holding her back. And she was saying like the only reason that it was like she didn't feel like the Lady Lake was gonna get her. She was like, when I look in the mirror, I don't even see me. I see her.
Well, she was worried the lady in the lake was gonna take Jamie
Mm.
because remember she wakes up that one morning
Oh,
and
and
her
she's
hand is
yeah,
about to be on Jamie's throat.
that's true. It's
So
very
that's
interesting.
and I mean she says in the beginning of the series she says I want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a source of good, and maybe her taking her own life and in doing so taking the life of the lady in the lake, you wonder like, oh, was that her doing she completed her mission,
Mm-hmm.
and she atoned for what she believed her sin was. So before we get into any of the other categories, John, any other major points that you wanted to discuss from the story itself?
I like their symbolism of what purgatory is, what heaven is, and what hell is, in a sense.
Go on.
I do believe that they use like so them going back into their memories, and like for instance, Peter having to relive his the worst memory of his life, or the worst experience or moment of his life. I think that was his hell, as he said. Like this is hell. Having to relive that. Um, and I think for Hannah, she was getting those moments of heaven because it was the first time she met Owen. who she loved. So it was that moment. Maybe she cherished that moment. So that was like her heaven, but then she still had work to do in the purgatory. So I like that symbolism, and I thought that was very interesting the way they worked it into to the show.
Yeah, 100%. I think even there was hell on earth for the living
Yeah,
with Uncle Quint, whose name I can't remember right now.
yeah. I blanked on it also earlier.
Let me look it up while we
Our,
discuss, because you know
I have IMDb pulled up, so
he's
why I can
going
just
back, and he's is it Henry Thomas, Henry Wingrave?
Henry Wingrave. Henry Wingrave. Yeah.
Yeah, Henry Wingrave. He sees Henry Thomas is the actor's name, by the way. You know, he sees the worst moment of his life, and his brother telling him like, "Hey, you're dead to me," and then realizing like, "Oh, I'm the reason that my brother," and the love of Henry's life dying as well, because
Mm-hmm.
he loved his brother's wife, and because of his infidelity with his wife, it wound up getting to their demise. And any other topics you wanted to hit before we get into these awards?
No, I think that's about it. I'm excited to jump into these topics.
Alrighty, so we just talked about a couple of characters from the show. John, who is your favorite character?
Owen, without a doubt. I love that guy. I don't know,
Good pick.
and I think it was supposed to be that he was the light of the house in a sense. He didn't really have any baggage.
Well, his
Uh,
mother.
yeah, yeah, that's true. But like, he didn't have any. He wasn't traumatized in life like most of these people. That we saw. So he was the light. That was centered around this mini universe world that we had. His jokes were funny. He was witty. He kind of looked like an Indian version of Ted Mosby.
A little bit,
Right? I got Ted Mosby vibes so much.
but honestly, a little bit more likable than a Ted
Oh,
Mosby.
yeah,
Maybe not a
definitely.
little bit, a lot more likable.
Yeah. Um, Screw How I Met Your Mother, dude. But yeah, his little witty jokes in the kitchen.
Very
Oh,
funny.
dude, they were great. The writing for him was stupendous, or perfectly splendid. What
Excellent
about you,
reference.
Kyle?
So I have two contenders for my favorite character, and my favorite character might actually shock you a little bit. My two contenders, one is Owen. I think he's the most likable person on the show by a mile. And he's also a very relatable person, in that, for me at least, in that he uses his humor to kind of make situations that are very dire a little bit more easy to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah is another contender. I found her delightful throughout the show, and very sympathetic in what she was going through.
Yeah.
You know, this woman who everyone's really suffering throughout the entire show. Hannah's story particularly tragic in that her husband kind of just runs out on her with another
Mm-hmm.
woman, and she's kind of waiting for him, and it's like, oh, that's awful. But my favorite character is actually Jamie,
Hmm.
who is the gardener.
I do like her too. Yeah.
For me, the reason I instantly took to her is because she's the first person in the show to really feel like a real, fully formed human being
Mm.
who is reacting normally to abnormal things. When Miles shakes her ladder, she comes down and curses him out to his face, and she tells him, "I will kill you." And it's like, yes, finally someone's telling something to these kids, not being like, oh, they've been through so much. It's
Which
like, no,
do you think it was Miles shaking the ladder, or do you think it was Peter?
no, that was Peter, 100%.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's such a dick.
he's an awful person. He's a
Yeah.
monster. Well,
Wow.
awful ghost, I guess. Yeah, he's terrible. He's the worst, and that's what's so aggravating about like Becca being with him, because like Becca's like this beautiful, really wonderful person,
Mm-hmm.
albeit she's kind of only with these kids so she can
Get
get up in
something.
life.
Yeah. But you
But
could still tell her she cares about the kid.
still cares about the
Actually,
kids.
there's moments where she's like, I don't want to deal. Like they show a moment of like her in the
Yeah, no,
classroom
more than one.
where she's fed up.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess is
Which I
normal,
mean,
but
yeah, you're dealing with kids,
like
but
also the kids are fighting right in front of you. You can just like get up. You can do that on your own time,
yeah.
not like when you're. So yeah, but I just think Jamie's really like a breath of fresh, realistic air in the
Yeah,
show.
and I love the way she talks about flowers. The
Yeah,
way
she
she
made me.
described
She.
them and
I don't like
how
botany. I don't like being outdoors. I like being this thing behind me. If you're watching the video, I like this a TV. Um, I'm not a big bugs guy, and she's out there in the middle of the night growing flowers that die in 12 hours, and it's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's really nice.
Yeah, and her explanation behind it of like you could pour everything into it. You basically control the life of the flower, and it makes sense with her story that she had. And then that type of that level of writing is just like wow, that took some thought and effort, and it played so well into the later end of the story. And you really feel bad for her because you find out that she is the narrator. Um,
Yeah. Did you
and
see that coming?
um, no, the whole like it took me until like when they went back to it, and I was like, oh, it's a Flora's wedding.
Yeah.
Like this is crazy. And then I was like, oh, that's them. I was like, that was done really, really well, in my opinion. And it was a nice little Easter egg that I do wonder if anyone picked it up earlier on. And I could see if somehow you did, which I had no inkling. If somehow you did, that could ruin the whole
So I
season
mean,
or
off rip, I knew who is revealed to be Owen. I knew her and Jamie, who was revealed to be Jamie. I knew those two knew each other obviously because when she arrives to the wedding, Owen
yeah.
looks at her kind of like, "Oh God,
Yeah.
oh no." Um, but I up until the last episode, I didn't realize. Oh, it's them.
Yeah. And then it is very interesting, and you'll see why they do have, so I'm not going to say what it is. If you watch this and you did watch season 1, there is some homages between um the present day of all these characters um and the first season, like what happens with them and how they their growth and whatnot, and things that happened in the first season. They do have those little bit of links, which I enjoyed, um, and we might have to do like a little quick comparison video between the two seasons once you watch this one, the first
Maybe
one.
that could be next pod.
Yeah, because there's some key elements that they continue with season 1 and season 2 that I think were very interesting. Even key elements of things that happen to actors who play characters in season 1 and season 2 that I'm like, that's crazy. Um, so that's all very interesting. But once again, we'll get into that. But I did really enjoy like that scene and like being like, oh my god, it all makes sense now.
Next category, scariest moment. I have a contender and a winner. For me, the contender was the biggest jump scare that I had when Danny runs outside to, I believe, to try and find the person whose muddy footprints are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
She thought it was Peter? Wasn't she going out to find Peter?
oh, was it? I forget what the scene was. Either that or someone had just left. It might have been the night that Owen's mother died.
Mm.
And they drive off. She's alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that scene. And she turns around and she sees her fiance.
Mm-hmm. And then it sucks him back.
Yeah, and then he gets sucked back into the house because he's
Yeah.
getting hit by the truck.
Uh-huh.
That was the moment that I'm getting chills just thinking about it. That was the
Yeah,
moment where I went,
me
"Oh my
too.
god!"
But
Because
which is
the
so
sound,
weird to think about because it's not something coming at you that's scary. It's something being pulled away, which is like,
but the sound of it,
yeah.
it's wild. That
Mm-hmm.
sound design was really really excellently done. But the scariest moment for me is a scene in which it's really late at night and we can hear Flora singing, and there's
Mm.
another voice there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the shot of Flora playing with her toys, and then we see something moving behind her, and then Flora goes around, turns around, and goes, "Shh, stop it!" And the thing just kind of goes, "Ugh," and it lays back down, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
eventually revealed to be the sister that was
Yeah.
killed a long time ago. And that was one where I was like, oh my god, this show is wild. That's my scariest moment award. What about you?
One of the and once again, I think the creepy and scary go hand in hand. But where Danny moves one of the dolls, and Flora just like sitting up in bed and just like, why are you touching that? Like, because this is early on when you're like, these kids might be demonic. We don't know yet. Like, so she's like, what are you doing? Like, don't touch the dolls. And which one thing, going back, I do wish they kind of elaborated on what the hell was the purpose of the dolls. Why
Yeah,
they,
did they?
why
Why I
did they,
do think the dolls showed where someone was in the house.
yes, but like, did they move themselves? Like, did they,
Yes, 100%. That was a confusing bit.
oh, crap, though. That makes sense to why the Lady of the Lake was never in the house. She was in the middle of the floor because that was the lake with representation of the house.
Oh
Possibly. And she was
yeah,
under the dresser, so in the lake, maybe. That does make a little sense.
that does. Yeah.
And then maybe Flora could use it to track where it was.
Well, there was a moment where she saw that toy in the house, and she went, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
my god."
Yeah. Oh, and that's why they need to stop Danny from being.
Well, that's why they went
Getting into
downstairs and
the-
were like, "Hey, I need milk," and then you saw the lady walking
Yeah.
around.
These kids were such good kids. Also,
Well,
shout
that's
out
why they
to the
that's
the
why they locked her in the closet as well.
Yeah, shout out to the actor and actress that play the kid or that who are the kids.
Oh, they're
Very good
phenomenal.
child stars.
Those
Hopefully.
kids are going to be
Yeah.
stars in the making. Let me get their names: Benjamin Evan Ainsworth and Amelie Amali B. Smith. Those two are phenomenal. Really, really great stuff from the two of them.
Oh wait, no, that's Jamie's character. I was gonna say, isn't that Amelia or Emily?
No,
Oh wait.
Flora's actor, her name is spelled
Oh, bro,
Amelie.
the actress who plays Jamie is the same name but with an A at the end instead of an E.
Which makes it Amelia, which is a lot easier to pronounce. But yeah,
Wow.
I mean, everyone did a really good job in this series for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, those two, the kids in particular, were really, really great.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
But that one scene, and then the scene where Miles was doing the play, where
oh
he was
yeah,
walking.
that was wild.
That was like,
Was that Miles or was that Peter?
I don't. Ooh, good question. Was that?
Why were the kids talking about that stuff?
I might have to rewatch that scene. That might be Peter, because the way he walks and he talks.
It's very intense.
Oh, and the words he used. I have to rewatch that scene to find out, because that's a really good point. I never even thought about that, but it's very creepy.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your most tragic scene?
I want to say the most tragic scene is when Peter kills Hannah. It broke my heart because
That's my winner as well.
Hannah's such a sweet lady, like caring. Yeah. She just wants to take care of the house, the kids. You could tell like she's so like reserved when she goes and she prays for everyone. Is that why she has an extra candle lit, but she can't say who it's for? Is it because it's for herself? She just doesn't know it.
Maybe.
Wow, so many little touches. And then like I like how she was seeing the crack because that is the last thing she saw, but you didn't realize that why she was seeing cracks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it was the crack in the well. Which doesn't make why she's my favorite. The most tragic moment. I just thought she didn't deserve it, and all because of Peter.
Yeah, Peter is a piece of garbage. You know for a fact that if in this universe there is a heaven and hell, you know where he went.
Yeah,
1000%.
Yeah,
that's my winner as well. A soft contender was Danny's fiance dying after being broken up with. That sucks.
Yeah, I also even though you could argue she put herself in this situation, Becca dying, Peter killing Becca.
That sucked.
And like her realizing, and like in her dream, the water's coming down.
Mm-hmm.
That's so tragic. And then she realizes, wait, you killed me, and
Really, really dark.
yeah,
Uh, and now, last award, the biggest jaw dropper, rather.
biggest jaw dropper. You lead with yours.
Absolutely. So a contender was Papa Wingrave finding out that he was a cuckold. That was rough. I was like, oh no, he knew. I was cringing, dude.
Mhm.
But my winner is the scene in which Miles tells his teacher, I should have tortured the bird before I killed it. That was so I think it's episode 2 or 3.
Yeah.
In that moment, I was like, oh, there's no depths that this show won't take.
Mm-hmm.
If they're having a kid
When you have a
read these
kid talk
lines,
about, yeah.
like, oh yeah, this is some really dark, twisted. This is like this is like finding this is like finding a spot in town that serves your favorite sandwich, and the following week it closes down. That's how dark that scene was. It's like this is some really twisted stuff. John, what's
That analogy is beautiful.
well, can you? I don't even want to. I didn't want to say it out loud because it's like, well, what if that happens to me in the future? I don't want to find my favorite sandwich spot. What is your biggest jaw dropper?
I would have to say, um, every time you realized someone was dead, it always caught me off guard almost.
Mm.
And then but I think my biggest was the whole background story of finding out that the uncle was really Flora's father, and that whole storyline. I was just the whole time I was just like, what? I, uh, wow, because then it did bring up the question of, did the husband murder suicide? Like, did he just, because like they just said it was an accident. They could have just driven off of a cliff. I don't think they elaborated what type of accident it was.
They didn't, and then at the same time, Ghost
Mm-hmm.
Ghost Henry says, "Do you want to tell them what really happened?"
Yeah, and like it was
So it's kind of like, did he kill
that
him?
whole backstory line was just like, oof, oh my
Really
god,
rough,
and
really
it
really
made
rough.
so much sense to why he was seeing the ghost of himself. Um, and yeah, it was very tragic that all had to happen that way.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
but it also plays into the storyline of the main reason the house is haunted in the first place. Where it's opposite. Well, it was sisters who married the same man or
Oh yeah,
loved the same man, and now it's brothers who love the same woman. And it's just like, wow.
100%.
That
Yeah, I mean, I thought the show was really well done on all angles.
mhm.
John, before we get out of here, do you have a rating for the show out of 10, or for the season, I should say?
Um, I think I'd have to give it a 9 out of 10.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
obviously, I do think there were some points here and there that could be improved upon. I do think it was very well done. Now I'm saying 9 out of 10. I might in the future think, hey, maybe that was a little too high of a score, just because I'm like, it did creep me out, but I do think I could have been creeped out a little more. Maybe that's due to my own fault of anticipating a lot of things. Um, but I think it was so well done and continue, and it's so hard for a second. And I'm coming into it thinking of it as a second season,
Mm.
and it's still holding up how well done it is. Um, because I loved the first season just that much, and it was the first time seeing something the way it was done, how it was done. Um, this beautiful storytelling through horror genre, and then they were able to continue it without losing any of the sense of itself and what it is. So that's why I'm giving it such a high mark. What about you,
Yeah, I'm
Kyle?
gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Still a really high score for me. Uh, I thought it was a really well done show. There was some stuff that I wasn't crazy about in terms of its continuity errors. There, an entire episode out of a 9 episode season
Mm-hmm.
didn't work for me entirely. So that's a lot. Can you do the quick math on that? What's 1 out of 9 equal out to percentage wise?
No.
No. We'll go under 10. Oh no, over 10%. Correct? Over 10.
It would be just over, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it would
So
be
we'll
like
call
12.
it 11%. And yeah, but I still think it was a really done season. I'm really hoping that they continue the series, if we're calling it a series.
Yeah, I hope so too. I just like the storytelling behind the genre, as Kyle and I talked about with what we want to see out of the Marvel universe and them using different genres to tell stories. This is an example of how it could work. You could still get really well told stories out of genres that aren't your typical storytelling genre, right?
Yeah.
Like we saw them do it with a comedy. This is an example of horror. So I hopefully this opens up people's eyes to, hey, let's use a genre that's not stereotypically meant for this type of thing, and let's use it to do really good storytelling. Especially more shows like this. I know American Horror Story. I don't think American Horror Story even gets the clout it should because it started this, right? There are really good stories, but I think the storytelling in these shows, Haunting of Hill House and Haunting of Bly Manor, just takes it to the next level. Because it doesn't rely on gore. It doesn't rely on jump scares. It has that thrill and that creepiness underlying almost everything it does, and then it hits you with such a good storyline.
100%. 100%. And that, I believe, unless you have anything else to say, Johnny, uh, will that wrap it up here?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are watching this and you got to this point or listening and got to this point, I do want to hear Kyle's thoughts on comparing the two seasons. Now, I don't know if we'll do a full hour video on it. Maybe it'll just be something quick, comparing, contrasting, just talking about what he thought now that he did go back and watch it. I actually think Slee and I are going to go back and watch it too because we kind of want a refresher. And she mentioned, like, I kind of want to rewatch season 1. So maybe we'll rewatch it too, so it's fresh in my mind, and then we could talk about it on the next pod. But if there is anything that you guys want us to think about between those two, or anything that you want us to address about this one, let us know, and then maybe we could put it in the next video and talk about it.
100%. And if the people did want to reach out to us like that, where can the people find you, John?
As always, you can find me on Instagram at Ginger Gorilla Gaming, Twitter Ginger Gorilla Gaming, YouTube Ginger Gorilla Gaming, and on Twitch. I mean, you probably won't reach out about this on Twitch, but if so, have at it. And reach out, check it out, check out the content on those. Not everything might be along the lines of TV show analysis and movie breakdown. But then you could also check out Kyle's stuff. And Kyle, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Buff Charmander. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/geeksweekly. Sean has a really interesting video coming out. Let's see, from when this podcast releases last weekend. Really, it's coming out like either probably tomorrow morning. He's pitching a Star Wars movie, actually, I think a trilogy of Star Wars movies. We got some interesting content on the way / already on the channel. You can check me out on John's streams. I'm there a lot of the times, like my voice at least.
Mm-hmm.
Have some fun. We'll chat about some stuff. And I mean, if you are listening to this and you also want us to touch on it, you have any recommendations for shows that you think that we can do this type of podcast on?
I'm really enjoying the TV show breakdown analysis conversations we've been having. Whether
Especially with such slow news.
Yeah, because like that's the thing. Like I know we've kind of fell onto this through not being able to talk about what this podcast was started as, which I don't think we ever need to be like, hey, we need to stick to this or we need to stick to that because it's our podcast. But with that said, I've really enjoyed doing these conversations through reality TV shows or shows like this. And if you guys do want us to watch more shows or check out certain things, yeah, let us know. I mean, we are content gods. We consume content.
Yeah,
Way
not
too
gods in
much.
that we make godly
No,
content.
no,
In
no.
terms of I would say content fiends. Like we
Fiends. Yeah, we crave
crave it. Yes,
content.
absolutely.
Hours and hours and hours watched a week.
Well, a little peek behind the curtains. That's how John and I became really, really close friends. Is that we would share recommendations for podcasts or for shows or movies, whatever the
Mhm.
case may be, and that's kind of how like we became closer and closer friends, and then
Yeah.
eventually led to this podcast, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think that about does it for us here on this episode of
Yes, sir.
Gorilla and the Geek. Thank you all very much for watching and or listening. And yeah, that'll do it for us here. Once again, I've been Kyle, joined as always by John the Ginger Gorilla. Stay safe and stay sweaty, my friends. We'll see you again next time.
Peace.